Let's talk about what happened to 13-year-old Laura Ayala. Laura was born on October 29, 1988. She's described as being a very shy and reserved young girl, but she was also very organized and did very well in school. She was an honor student and was a part of the chess club, writing club, garden club, and she always got A+ on everything, and she took school very seriously. On Sunday, March 10, 2002, Laura asked her mom if she could borrow some money to walk to the store nearby. She needed to buy some newspaper for a project that wasn't even due tomorrow, but she really wanted to get it done tonight. Her mother, Angelica, said, "No, it's 10 p.m., you're not walking to the store by yourself," but Laura insisted that she really wanted to finish this project tonight. Despite her mother telling her no, Laura left the apartment complex at around 10:15 p.m. She walked to the Broadway convenience store that was located inside the Conoco gas station that was literally less than 100 feet from her apartment. It was literally only a 2-minute walk. Around 5 to 10 minutes after Laura left, her mother Angelica realizes that she was gone. She started to get worried because it's only a 2-minute walk, so why was Laura gone for so long? She decides to walk to the store, and when she gets inside, Laura is nowhere to be found. Angelica asked the employees if they saw a little girl come in and buy some newspaper, and they say yes. They said that a girl matching Laura's description came inside, bought the newspaper, and then quickly left alone. She starts to look around and she ends up finding Laura's sandals and the newspaper she bought scattered in this parking lot between the gas station and the apartment. Angelica immediately began to scream and panic, and she called the police department and reported Laura as missing. Since Laura's belongings were found scattered, police believe that she may have been abducted. The convenience store didn't have any cameras, so they weren't able to see if maybe someone approached Laura or if maybe someone followed after her. People in the community were very supportive towards Laura's family, and they were out there helping the police and searching for Laura. A witness comes forward and says that they saw a full-size, mid-1980s maroon cargo van near the convenience store at the time of Laura's disappearance. A neighbor comes forward and says that they also saw the same van parked in the parking lot where Laura's belongings were found. They said the sliding door was open and that either a Hispanic or Caucasian male was standing near the van. Since it's believed to be a work van, police were able to track down a man named Martin Marmolejo. Martin worked as a plumber at the gas station, and the night that Laura disappeared, Martin and his partner were actually there working, but his partner left and Martin stayed there alone until 10 p.m. His van does match the description of the van seen at the time Laura disappeared, and police have questioned him, but they believe he's more of a witness than a suspect in the abduction. So police continue with the investigation, and they start to follow a new theory that maybe Laura was put on a bus and taken to Reynosa, Mexico. A bus driver from the El Expreso bus company told police that a man and a woman boarded this bus with a young girl fitting Laura's description. When he checked the passenger's log, this girl's name was Laura A. Okay, part 2 is up now. This is part 2 on what happened to 13-year-old Laura Ayala. So police were able to track down the couple that boarded this bus with the little girl, and they realized that when they arrived to Reynosa, Mexico, all 3 of them separated. So to this day, police have not been able to confirm this sighting, and they kind of think that this was a dead end. So then a few months go by since Laura's disappearance, and police have no leads, no suspects, and no idea as to what happened to Laura. Then in August of 2002, police began investigating 3 men in connection with the murder of several women in East End, Texas. These 3 men are 25-year-old Walter Alexander Sorto, 24-year-old Rafael Cubas, and 16-year-old Eduardo Navarro. In February of 2003, the 3 of them were arrested for the R-word and murder of several women. Edgardo and Walter were sentenced to death, while Navarro was only sentenced to 13 years since he was only the getaway driver and was only 16 years old. So the trio admitted that they would sometimes use Edgardo's father's car to use for these abductions. So police search the father's car, and they end up finding blood that doesn't belong to any of the known victims. These detectives are familiar with the case of Laura Ayala, so they call the Houston Police Department and they tell them, "Listen, you need to get a DNA sample from Laura's family ASAP because we might have found something." So they get the DNA sample and test it to the DNA found in the back of the van, and it comes back as a match. This blood found in the back of this van used by 3 men to abduct and murder young females belonged to 13-year-old Laura Ayala. The trio says that they had nothing to do with Laura's disappearance, and to this day, they deny everything. Since Laura's body has not been found and the only evidence they found in the van was Laura's blood, these 3 men have never been charged with her disappearance or murder. To this day, Edgardo and Walter are still on death row, and they continue to deny having anything to do with Laura's disappearance. Navarro already served his 13-year sentence in juvenile prison, and he's just out and about now. I'm sure if he did have something to do with Laura's disappearance, there's no way he's going to admit to that now because he's free. I truly hope that before these men are executed, they come forward and let Laura's family know what happened. Laura would be in her 30s now, and she had a full life ahead of her. It's really sad that all she was trying to do was buy some newspaper to complete a school project, and someone had to take her life from her. I know Angelica lives with a lot of regret, and she wishes she could have stopped Laura from leaving that night. The last update I saw is that Angelica still lives in that same apartment and that she hopes that Laura will come home soon. If you guys know anything about what happened to Laura, please contact the Houston Police Department. She needs to be found and properly laid to rest. All my thoughts and prayers go out to Laura's family, and I hope that she's found soon. Let's talk about Elizabeth Salgado and this penny that could be the key to solving her case. Elizabeth Elena Laguna Salgado was a 26-year-old girl from Chiapas, Mexico. Elizabeth was an honor student and a very active member of the LDS Church. After graduating from college, she told her family she wanted to move to the United States to learn English, get better opportunities, and also spread her Mormon faith. At the time, Elizabeth's mom, Libertad, had 2 brothers living in Provo, Utah. So she told Elizabeth, listen, go to Utah so at least you have some family nearby in case you need anything. So in March of 2015, Elizabeth got a student visa, enrolled herself at this school, and moved to these apartments in Provo, Utah. At first, she kind of struggled to make friends since she didn't really know English. However, once she joined the LDS Church in Utah, there was a lot of people there that spoke Spanish, so she quickly started to make new friends. Got really close to this guy named Mackie Smith, who said Elizabeth was really pretty, and anytime they would go out, she would always get hit on by every single guy, but that she would always say no because she wanted to focus on her faith and on her studies, and he says that Elizabeth was just a really kind and caring person. So then, on Thursday, April 16, 2015, Elizabeth finished school at around 1:30 p.m. and began the 30-minute walk back to her apartment. Since Elizabeth didn't have a car, she asked her Uncle Rudy if he could pick her up at 5 p.m. to take her to Walmart and get some groceries. As Elizabeth was walking home, one of her sisters texted her and asked her, "What are you doing?" Elizabeth replied and said, "I already left school," which her sister thought was really weird. Elizabeth was never that short with her text messages, so her sister thought it was weird and texted her again, but this time Elizabeth did not reply. The family thought it was a little weird that she hadn't replied, but they just assumed that her phone had died. So then 5 p.m. rolls around and Rudy shows up at Elizabeth's apartment to pick her up. He sends her a text message letting her know he's outside, but she doesn't reply. After a few minutes of waiting, he knocks on the apartment door but doesn't get a response. He just assumes that maybe Elizabeth walked to Walmart instead and didn't let him know, so then he heads over to Walmart to see if he can find her. So Rudy arrives to Walmart and goes through every single aisle looking for Elizabeth but doesn't see her. Now he's thinking that maybe Elizabeth got called into work and that's why she didn't show up. So then he drives over to the Mexican restaurant where Elizabeth works at and she's not there. He thought this was a little bit weird but figured maybe Elizabeth had made plans with someone else and forgot to tell him, so he decided to just go home. So the next morning, Elizabeth's family wakes up and they expect to find a lot of messages from Elizabeth saying, "Sorry, my phone died, that's why I didn't call you yesterday." However, when they woke up, they had no messages or calls from Elizabeth. Libertad is freaking out at this point and she calls her brother Rudy and tells him to go check on Elizabeth. So he goes over to Elizabeth's school to see if she's there, but she isn't. So then he goes over to Elizabeth's apartment and her roommates answer the door. They tell Rudy that they haven't seen Elizabeth since yesterday morning, which means that after Elizabeth left school and started walking home, she never made it to her apartment. Then they call Elizabeth's job and they tell them that Elizabeth never showed up for her shift. That's when the family decided to call the police department and report Elizabeth as missing. A couple of students say that they did see her on her walk back to her apartment, but then she just vanished. Okay, part 2 is up now. Okay, this is part 2 on what happened to 26-year-old Elizabeth Salgado. So detectives decide to recreate the route Elizabeth would take from school to her apartment, and as they're walking along the route, they notice that this is a very busy street, so if she was abducted, someone would have seen it. They also checked if there were any cameras along the route, but there weren't. Word of Elizabeth's disappearance spread all over Utah and even reached Elizabeth Smart. If you're not familiar with Elizabeth Smart, I recommend you look up her story because she's very inspirational. But her and her family decided to help Elizabeth Salgado's family and help search for her and raise money, and they truly thought that they would find Elizabeth alive. Elizabeth's family was able to fly from Chiapas to Utah to help in this search, and everyone was looking everywhere, but there was just no sign of Elizabeth. Police were getting very frustrated with the case because they didn't even know where to begin looking. They had no crime scene, they didn't know the exact spot where Elizabeth vanished. I mean, they literally had nothing. This is when police began to theorize that maybe the uncles had something to do with it. They did conduct a polygraph test on Rudy and he passed. However, Elizabeth's other uncle named Rosenberg failed his. However, when police began to investigate him more, they found out he had a clear alibi for the day Elizabeth disappeared. However, when people heard that he had failed the polygraph test, a lot of people stopped helping the family and didn't want to search for Elizabeth anymore. Even though the uncle was cleared, a lot of people stopped supporting the family. So then 3 years go by since Elizabeth disappeared and there's still nothing. It wasn't until Friday, May 18th of 2018, a.m., police receive a call from a man saying he discovered human remains while hiking at Hobble Creek Canyon. He was searching for a spot to set up camp and he ended up finding a hollow grave, and that's where the human remains were. The medical examiner confirms that this is in fact 26-year-old Elizabeth Salgado. She was found only 15 miles away from where she was last seen. It's so crazy that it took 3 years for someone to find her remains. However, because of the state of her body, the medical examiner was not able to determine a cause of death. So in 2019, the family decided to hire a private investigator named Jason Jensen. He's part of the Utah Cold Case Coalition, and he decided to go to the spot where Elizabeth's body was found to further investigate. While he was searching the area, his metal detector went off. Under some leaves, he found a 2006 penny. Upon further investigation of the penny, they ended up finding male DNA. So now Jason and the family want to find whosever DNA this matched to, because even if they aren't the killer, they still have to explain how they dropped their penny at a spot where human remains were for the last 3 years. Since Jason works for a nonprofit, they currently don't have enough resources to do more testing and create a more extensive DNA profile from the penny. I do have a GoFundMe to raise money for this DNA testing, and when I posted my YouTube video, it was at $300 and now it's at $4,600. So thank you to everyone that donated. We're so close to hitting the $5,000. To this day, Elizabeth's killer has never been caught. Some people believe it was someone she most likely knew and offered her a ride home. That's why no one heard or saw someone getting abducted, because she went willingly. I really hope that the police continue their investigation until her killer is finally caught. Rest in peace, Elizabeth, and I hope you have some justice soon. Let's talk about the murder of Bunny Folger. Bunny lived in a luxurious apartment called the Arconia, which is located in the Upper West Side of New York. Bunny had lived there her entire life and eventually became president of the board for the building. Now, a lot of people describe her as being a bitter old lady who was obsessed with rules and keeping everybody in check. It didn't seem like she had a lot of friends, and her main priority in life was managing the Arconia. So fast forward to March 12th, Bunny's pet bird woke her up bright and early. It turns out that this was Bunny's final day as president of the board, and she only had one more board meeting that day before officially retiring. So she wakes up, gets ready for the day, and starts walking around the building. She meets with her new replacement, Nina, and they talk about what needs to be done for the building and also just gets her ready to take on the new role. After this, she meets up with her friend Uma, and they decide to go for a short stroll. Bunny tells Uma that she's thinking about moving to Florida now that she's officially retiring, and of course, Uma tries to tell her no because she's going to miss living with her best friend. After this, Bunny gets a call from someone asking about a grand painting that she owns. This painting is worth millions, and it seems like Bunny was getting frustrated about this call, so she hung up. Then she headed over to her favorite diner, had a yummy lunch, and then made her way back to the Arconia. When she walked through her front door, she was greeted by other members of the board who actually threw her a surprise going away party. They kept telling her that they were going to miss her and that they were super excited for her retirement. But this is when Bunny tells them, listen, I changed my mind. I'm not going to step down as president. Which of course makes Nina upset because she was ready to be the new president of the board, and now that's not happening. So after everyone leaves the party, Bunny is at her apartment watching TV alone when she hears some laughter coming from her next door neighbor. She walks over there and decides to offer them some champagne, trying to make friends and hoping that they'll invite her in to hang out. Mabel, Charles, and Oliver open the front door. They thank Bunny for the gift. They offer her some merch from their podcast, and then they just shut the door in her face. Of course, Bunny was very hurt by this, so she decided to just go home and continue to watch TV alone. As she's watching TV alone, she hears a knock at the door. So she opens the front door and says, "What do you want?" Then she is stabbed to death. So who could have done this? Why would someone want Bunny dead? Well, tune in on Hulu to watch Only Murders in the Building and follow along as a trio investigates Bunny's death. There's a new episode every Tuesday, and trust me, you don't want to miss out. This is part 2 on what happened to 10-year-old Bianca LeBron. So her friends tell police that Bianca had a secret boyfriend and that he was an older male. They had seen Bianca with this man numerous times, holding hands, hanging out together, and they even saw them kiss. Police ask the friends if they know who this man is, and they say it was then 20-year-old Jason Lara, who looks similar to this composite sketch. When police head over to Jason's house, he's no longer there and it appears he has left Connecticut. So in the meantime, police go to speak with Bianca's family to see if they knew about the secret boyfriend and if they know who Jason was, and it turns out they did. Bianca's grandmother said that Jason is the son of her late brother's girlfriend. So he isn't blood related to Bianca, he's only related to her because his mom is dating one of Bianca's relatives. Sonia says that Bianca would often go to Jason's house to hang out, but that she doesn't think anything serious was going on with them. I mean, she's 10 years old. How would she be dating a 20-year-old? But Bianca's friends say that she would often go to her uncle's house because a boy that she liked was living there, aka Jason. Eventually, a year later in 2003, police track down Jason in Florida and they begin to question him about Bianca. He says he has no idea where she is, that he didn't have anything to do with her disappearance, and that he also was never in a romantic relationship with her. He says that they never kissed, they never hold hands, and they never crossed that line. His girlfriend at the time, who he had been dating for 3 years, also said that this relationship never happened and that these allegations were insane. So he gave police an alibi as to where he was when Bianca disappeared. Police went to go check that alibi, and it turned out to be true. Jason was nowhere near the school when Bianca disappeared, and police cleared him. However, I still think it's weird. Like, why would Bianca tell people that this was her boyfriend? And even if she was just saying that to be like, oh yeah, I have a boyfriend, people literally saw them kissing. So there definitely was something going on there, but police let him go. So in order to raise awareness, Bianca's mother Carmelita went on the Mari show. On the show, they had a psychic go to the neighborhood where Bianca lived and go to her school to see if he could feel or see something that could help find her. The psychic said that whoever took Bianca is not a relative and that it's someone that has been watching her for a while and is into little girls. He also believes that this man used Carmelita's name as a ruse to gain Bianca's trust, which is actually something that Carmelita believes. In Hispanic culture, it's very common to refer to a family friend as your uncle or aunt. Like, for example, I used to call my parents' friends my tia, like my aunt, even though they weren't directly related to me. So Carmelita believes that maybe that's what Bianca was doing. Maybe she was using the term uncle a little bit more loosely. Or it's also possible that this man lied to Bianca and said, yeah, I'm your uncle, I'm related to your mom Carmelita, and that's how he was able to gain her trust. Either way, police looked into all of Bianca's family and they cleared all of her relatives and her parents. They officially declared Bianca's abduction as a non-family abduction. To this day, in August of 2022, Bianca is still missing. If you know anything about Bianca's whereabouts, please contact the number on the screen. Also, the school was permanently shut down. This is what happened to 20-year-old Amber Tuckero. Amber was born on January 3rd, 1990 in northern Alberta, Canada. Amber was adopted by the Tuckero family, who are members of the Mikisew Cree First Nation. When Amber was 19 years old, she got pregnant and gave birth to a beautiful little boy named Jacob. Amber absolutely loved her son, but she was struggling financially, so she would sometimes go between her family's house and a woman's shelter called the Unity House. At the Unity House, Amber became close friends with a girl named Evangeline, and they decided it would be fun to take a girls' trip to the city of Edmonton, which is in Alberta, Canada. Now, Amber's mother, Tootsie, was worried about this weekend trip. She felt like it was unsafe for the girls to be going by themselves, and she also wondered what Amber was going to do about Jacob. However, Amber reassured her mother and told her that everything was going to be okay. She told her that she actually was going to take Jacob with her and that it was just going to be a quick 2-day trip. So, on Tuesday, August 17, 2010, Amber, Jacob, and Evangeline all got on a plane and flew from Fort McMurray to the city of Edmonton. The girls were on a tight budget, so they decided to stay at this motel in the city of Nisku, which is around 30 minutes away from Edmonton. The next day, on Wednesday, August 18th at around 7 p.m., Amber told Evangeline that she wanted to go into the city of Edmonton by herself. And her reasons for wanting to go into the city by herself were unknown. So she asked Evangeline if she could watch Jacob, who was 14 months old at the time. Evangeline said, yeah, that's fine, and between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m., Amber left the motel. However, when morning came around on Thursday, August 19th, Amber had still not returned. Now, Evangeline started to get worried because why would Amber just leave her there alone overnight with her son? So she decided to call Tootsie to see if Tootsie knew where she was because Amber had been in contact with her mom the entire trip. But when she called Tootsie, she said that she also hadn't heard from Amber since last night. Tootsie immediately knew that something was wrong, so she decided to call the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, also known as the RCMP, and report her daughter as missing. However, the police didn't really seem to care. They told Tootsie that her daughter was most likely out partying and that she was maybe drunk or just hanging out with a guy and she would be back later. They basically told her that she needed to wait another 24 hours before officially reporting her daughter as missing. Of course, this wasn't going to stop Tootsie, so she immediately began to search for her daughter. Now, since the girls didn't have a car, Amber told Evangeline that she was going to hitchhike a ride into the city. Evangeline says that she saw Amber get into a car, but she doesn't really remember what color the car was, what type of car it was, or who was driving. And of course, the hotel didn't have any security footage, so there was really no way to track down this driver. Then, for the next 2 years, Amber's case would remain still. It wasn't until August 28, 2012 that there was finally some movement in her case. The RCMP released a recorded phone conversation between Amber and her brother Paul, which they believe captures her last moments. This phone call was 17 minutes long, but police have only released 60 seconds. Part 2 is up now. This is part 2 on what happened to 20-year-old Amber Tuccaro. I'll put a clip of the recording here, but just a quick little warning that it is very frightening and it may have captured the last moments of Amber's life.
Where are we going?
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north of Beaumont. Yo, where are we going? No, this is... Are you fucking kidding me? You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we? No, we're not. So what are these roads going to?
The 50th Street.
50th Street. Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Yo, where are we going?
50th Street.
50th Street.
50th Street.
East, right?
East.
Over.
Bravo.
Now, the reason this phone call was recorded is because Amber had called her brother Paul, who was currently incarcerated, so any incoming calls were automatically recorded. As you can hear, Amber gets suspicious of the driver and continues to ask him if they're going in the right direction. Anything the man says, she's repeating back so that her brother Paul can hear on the other line. So in the call, the man keeps saying that he's driving north to 50th Street and that's going to take him into the city of Edmonton. However, a lot of people from the area have come forward and said that he actually wasn't driving to 50th Street and that he instead took her south of Nisku into the rural county of Leduc. This man was literally taking her in the opposite direction of where she wanted to go. So then, 4 days after this phone call was released on September 1st, 2012, horseback riders found a skull in a farmer's field just south of Amber's motel. And when police checked the dental records, it confirmed that this was the skull of 20-year-old Amber Tuccaro. Since her partial remains were heavily decomposed, the medical examiner could not determine a cause of death. Now, the drive from Amber's motel to the location where her body was found is exactly 17 minutes long, which is exactly the length of the phone call between Amber and her brother Paul. This means that as soon as the phone call was disconnected, Amber was most likely killed. So then 3 women came forward and said that they recognized the voice in the phone recording. They identified this man as horse ranch owner named Pat Carson. Pat is a previously convicted sex offender that has been known to lure his victims to his ranch. So police went, they talked to Pat, they investigated him, but they don't believe that he's involved in Amber's death. However, a lot of people don't agree with the police and they feel like they need to investigate him further. Other people believe that Amber may have been the victim of a serial killer. This is because 4 other women's bodies were found in the area where Amber's remains were discovered. All 4 victims were Indigenous women who were hitchhiking. Now, this was all happening in a highway that was just 49 miles north of where Amber was last seen. This highway is called Highway 16, but it goes by the Highway of Tears since so many Indigenous women have been murdered and kidnapped along the route. There really hasn't been any proof or evidence to show that this is connected to Amber's death, but some people think it's possible. And that's pretty much it, you guys. It's been over a decade since Amber went missing and was murdered, and her case still remains unsolved. It's just really heartbreaking that Amber's case, as well as the cases of the other Indigenous women that have been murdered, are still unsolved to this day. My thoughts and prayers go out to Amber's family, and I truly hope that whoever's responsible for her death is caught soon. Let's talk about the disappearance of 2-year-old Tika Lewis from this bowling alley. Tika was born on July 4th, 1996 to parents Teresa and Robert. She's described as having a shy and quiet personality, but was definitely a mama's girl. She loved being with her mom and would cry if anyone else tried to pick her up. She loved to have cereal in the morning and then go over to the TV and put on the Winnie the Pooh show. Tika was a shy little girl, but she was also very joyful. She smiled a lot and was just an overall happy toddler. On January 23, 1999, over a dozen members of Tika's family headed over to the New Frontiers bowling lane in Tacoma, Washington. The bowling alley was extremely busy this night because it was league night, so there were over 300 people there. Tika's family was placed in the center and took up the lanes 7 and 8. As the family was bowling, Tika was particularly interested in the arcade. According to reports, lanes 7 and 8 were near the arcade, so Tika's family was able to keep a close eye on her. But of course the family didn't leave her by herself, and Teresa would follow her daughter around the arcade as she played the games. At around 10:15, 10:30, Tika sat down to play a driving game. Mother Teresa was with her, and she quickly glanced over to the bowling lane to see how her brother's turn was going. She said she looked away for around 10 to 15 seconds, and when she turned back, Tika was gone. She began looking all over the arcade and was checking in the spaces between the wall and the games just in case Tika was playing hide and seek. Teresa searched all over the bowling lane and eventually approached an off-duty police officer who was working security that night. The bowling alley made an announcement about Tika's disappearance and asked people to be on the lookout. Then, the Tacoma Police Department was called to the scene. The police got there pretty quickly and they began searching the area. At first, they thought that maybe Tika had wandered off on her own, so they blocked off the parking lot and checked every car that was trying to leave. They checked everyone's trunks, they checked inside the car, but Tika was nowhere to be found. Police interviewed all 300 people at the bowling alley, and one person came forward with information. This witness says that a maroon Pontiac Grand Am sped out of the parking lot around the time Tika went missing. This was a 4-door late 1980s or early 1990s model with dark tinted windows and a large spoiler. Police haven't been able to track down the driver and aren't sure if this is related in any way to Tika's disappearance. However, if this person had nothing to do with it, I feel like by now they would have come forward and told police that they were the driver. So I definitely think it's weird. Now, of course, police did investigate Tika's family and they were all cleared. 3 days after Tika disappeared on January 26, 2 search dogs led police to some bushes across the street from the bowling alley. There, police found a pile of men's clothing that are described as a navy blue wool peacoat with IS or JS written on the back label, off-white Lee brand jeans, and a Columbia brand button-down plaid shirt. Again, police aren't sure if these items are related to Tika's disappearance or if it's just a coincidence. Okay, go to part 2. This is part 2 on what happened to 2-year-old Tika Lewis and how she disappeared from this bowling alley. Now, the news was heavily covering Tika's disappearance, and this led to a handful of people sharing their experiences at this bowling alley. 2 months before Tika disappeared, a man had attended league night at this bowling alley with his 4-year-old son. His son had gone to the bathroom, and a few minutes later, a person walked in and saw his son lying on the ground. His son had been essayed. The father reported this incident to the security guards at the bowling alley, but this was never officially reported to police. Then, just weeks before Tika's disappearance, a family had gone to this bowling alley with their 6-year-old son. Their son had been playing in the arcade, and when the mother went to go check on him, she saw that a man was bending down near him, holding his hand and talking to him. As she approached this man and her child, she heard the man tell her son that he was his father. The mother reported this man to the security guards who escorted him out of the building. But again, this was never officially reported to police. Another incident occurred the day Tika went missing, but this didn't happen at the bowling alley. This happened at a park only a mile away. The father was at this park with his children when a man tried to abduct one of his kids. The man chased the father away, and he saw the man get into a blue Pontiac Grand Am. Now, in the moment this man did not report this incident to police, it wasn't until he saw the news about Tika's disappearance that he decided to finally report the incident. He realized that the man that tried to abduct his child at the park could be the same man that abducted Tika. But unfortunately, this man from the park has never been identified. There really wasn't much movement in Tika's case until 2020. This is when a witness, who the news is calling John, spoke with Q13 News about what he saw when Tika disappeared. He was 17 years old at the time, and he says he was with his family that night at the bowling alley. He had gone to the restroom, and as he was heading over there, he was rudely bumped into by a man. This guy was white and was holding hands with a little girl. John assumed that he was the girl's father and was just trying to rush his daughter to the bathroom. However, he says this moment stuck with him because the guy was just so rude, like he bumped into him and he didn't even apologize to John or anything. When John saw the news about Tika's disappearance, that's when he made the connection. He realized that the man that had bumped into him in the bathroom was holding hands with Tika. So he reported this to police, but they never really investigated it. They never questioned him about this incident or tried to get more info from him. So in 2020, when a new detective was assigned to the case named Steven, he read John's statement and knew that this was important information. So he reached out to John and asked him if he remembered what this man's face looked like, and John says he remembers it perfectly. John says this man was white, about 5'11", with a husky build. He had shoulder-length brown curly hair, a thick mustache, and a heavily pockmarked face. He was wearing a blue plaid shirt and faded jeans. This isn't the first time a pockmarked face has come into the investigation. America's Most Wanted had gone to the bowling lane to do a reenactment of Tika's disappearance. At the reenactment, this woman had seen a man with a pockmarked face standing nearby watching the reenactment. They thought that the man was suspicious, so they reported him to the police. They say killers often like to go back to the crime scene. So what are the odds that this woman saw a man with a pockmarked face watching the reenactment, and then John back in 1999 saw a man with a pockmarked face holding Tika's hand? To this day, in 2022, Tika Lewis has still not been found. Police are still investigating the case and are asking for the public's help in identifying the man with the pockmarked face and identifying the owner of the 90s or 80s Pontiac Grand Am that was seen peeling out of the parking lot. If you know anything about Tika's whereabouts or anything that could help her case, please contact the Tacoma, Washington Police Department. My thoughts and prayers go out to Tika's family, and I truly hope she is found soon. This is part 2 on the murder of Bunny Folger. So Charles, Mabel, and Oliver are celebrating the success of their podcast on the Arconia's rooftop. They run out of champagne, so Mabel offers to go down to her apartment to grab some more. When she walks through her front door, she realizes that there is blood on the floor. So she walks over towards the bloody stain, and that's when she sees Bunny stumbling towards her. And she is still wearing the hoodie they gave her that night, but now it's covered in blood. She stumbles towards Mabel and falls to the ground, dead, with a knitting needle stuck in her chest. Mabel is of course in shock, but is even more surprised when she realizes that the knitting needle belongs to her. At this moment, Charles and Oliver come rushing into Mabel's apartment and walk into this horrific scene. And Mabel tells them it's not what it looks like. Now, since police found Bunny's body in Mabel's apartment and her knitting needle was used as a weapon, police believe that she's their number one suspect. The police also bring in Charles and Oliver for questioning since they were found at the crime scene. And the trio explains to the police that they're innocent. They believe that a knife was actually used to attack Bunny and that someone put Mabel's knitting needle in her chest as a setup. Since the police didn't find the actual murder weapon, they released the trio. Now it's up to them to investigate Bunny's death and prove their innocence. So they decide to break into Bunny's apartment to see if they can find any clues. That's when they realize that Bunny's $1 million painting that she owned is now gone. Is this why Bunny was attacked? Was someone so desperate for that painting that they were willing to kill? So after the trio searches Bunny's home, Charles, Mabel, and Oliver decide to go back to their own apartments. And when Charles walks through his front door, he sees Bunny's painting hanging in his living room. So who is trying to set up the trio and why? Well, make sure to keep up with Charles, Mabel, and Oliver's investigation on Only Murders in the Building, and you can stream all episodes now only on Hulu. This is what happened to 24-year-old Giovanna Barrera and how she was taking off her roller skates in her driveway when a man approached her. Giovanna was born on October 23, 1996, and is from San Antonio, Texas. She has 2 younger sisters named Giselle and Destiny, whom she was very close to. Giovanna was known as Gigi to a lot of her friends and family, and they all describe her as a loving and caring person. She was enrolled at the Salon Professional Academy in San Antonio, Texas, and was studying to become a cosmetologist and esthetician. Even though Giovanna was very girly, she was also very active. She loved to work out, and she had recently began roller skating. On Wednesday, December 9th, 2020, Giovanna was hanging out at her grandmother's house and decided to go roller skating around the neighborhood while her grandmother finished cooking lunch. At around 2:30 p.m., Giovanna returned back to her grandmother's house and sat in the car in her driveway to take off her skates. At this point, Giovanna's grandmother walked outside to let her know that the food was ready, and Giovanna told her that she would be right in. The grandmother walked back inside the house to finish setting everything up, but then she realized that Giovanna was taking a long time. All Giovanna had to do was take off her roller skates and then come inside, so she didn't understand why it was taking her so long. As she was thinking this, her grandmother began to hear sirens. So she walked outside to see what was going on, and that's when she was approached by a police officer who told her to go back inside. She told the officer that she was out there looking for her granddaughter, and he told her to just step back because this was now a crime scene. Unfortunately, Giovanna had been shot and killed in her driveway. Her grandmother was in absolute shock. She didn't understand how this even happened. She didn't hear the gunshot, she didn't hear any commotion, nothing. 1 minute she was telling her granddaughter to come inside to eat, and then the next minute she was dead. So police start investigating the scene, and they talk to the neighbors to see if anyone saw anything. A neighbor did have a Ring doorbell, and they did capture a glimpse of what happened to Giovanna. This footage captured a man and a woman leaving the driveway in a vehicle similar to this. Thankfully, the footage did capture the license plate, and now police were on a hunt for them. Now, 2 days before Giovanna's death, a man had been violently robbed in broad daylight. He was out for a walk when a man and a woman approached him with a weapon and stole his phone, keys, and wallet. So, police were monitoring his bank accounts and credit cards to see if the thieves would use it, and they did. The suspects ended up using this man's credit card at a Quick Trip gas station, and when police went to go check the surveillance video from the gas station, they saw that the suspects were leaving in this car, the same one that was seen fleeing from Giovanna's driveway. Then, less than 48 hours after Giovanna's death, police tracked down the drivers and arrested 28-year-old Daniel Cavillo and 20-year-old Kayana Jones. And they revealed to police that they killed Giovanna over her cell phone. Yes, over a phone. So here's what happened. When Giovanna was sitting in her car taking off her roller skates, she had the car door open. As she was distracted doing this, Daniel and Kayana pulled up and Daniel got outside the car. Then he demanded Giovanna's cell phone. Okay, go to part 2. This is part 2 on what happened to 24-year-old Giovanna Barrera. So she was sitting in her car in her driveway when Daniel came up to her and demanded her cell phone. Giovanna told him no and then threw her cell phone under the seat of her car. And then, without any remorse, Daniel shot and killed her. Now, Kayana, who was still in the car, said that she heard the gunshot and then she saw Daniel running towards her. He got inside the car and told her what he had just done, and then they drove away. So she was basically the getaway driver. Now, the sheriff on the case has confirmed that Giovanna does not know these individuals and that this was just a random attack. These people were literally just out there in broad daylight trying to find someone to rob. So when they saw Giovanna sitting in her car with the door open, they decided to rob her. It's just crazy to me that they literally killed her over a cell phone. A lot of people wonder why Giovanna didn't just give up her cell phone, but you never know how you're going to react in that moment. Maybe her first instinct in that moment was just to throw her phone to the side, but at the end of the day, she should not be blamed for her death, and the only person responsible for this is Daniel. So Daniel was charged with capital murder and unlawfully carrying a firearm, while Kayana was charged with felony possession of a firearm, and there is a chance she could also be charged with capital murder. Daniel ended up taking a plea deal for a 40-year sentence, and his charge was lessened from capital murder to first-degree murder. He also received 10 years for aggravated robbery, and those sentences will run concurrently. He needs to serve half of his sentence before he's eligible for parole, and if he is released, he might get deported back to Mexico. Kayana has also agreed to a plea deal and will be sentenced later this year. As you can imagine, Giovanna's family was completely heartbroken by her death. They're so angry that these individuals just took her life as if she was no one. Over a cell phone, which is just even more aggravating. Her sisters gave a victim impact statement at Daniel's sentencing, and they said, "Giovanna will always be remembered as a hero for stopping someone like you from hurting other innocent people out there. You took her life like she was no one. She will always be remembered as our hero." One of Giovanna's sisters, Giselle, actually had a baby and named her son Giovanni after Giovanna. She's heartbroken that her son will never get to meet her aunt, but she knows that she's watching over them. So as I mentioned in part 1, Giovanna was studying at the Salon Professional Academy and she was set to graduate in May of 2021. They ended up having a memorial for Giovanna in front of her locker and they let her graduate posthumously. Giovanna had so much to live for, she had so many dreams to accomplish, and she was only 24. She was just out there minding her own business, roller skating, exercising, and then this happened to her. It's just absolutely heartbreaking, and her family wants to share her story and continue to spread awareness. They want people to be more aware about this type of violence and how it can happen anywhere at any time. My thoughts and prayers go out to the family, and may Giovanna rest in peace. Let's talk about what happened to 10-year-old Bianca LeBron. Bianca LeBron was born on June 26, 1991 and was from Bridgeport, Connecticut. She was a 5th grade student at Elias House School and is described as being a very good student. She loved doing her homework, she did very well in classes, and she never skipped school. She would even play as teacher when she would play with her younger cousins, and she would often help them with their homework. She's also described as being very friendly, outgoing, and just an overall happy child. On Wednesday, November 7, 2001, Bianca arrived to school at around 8:30 in the morning. She was standing outside, waiting to check in for class, when all of a sudden, a two-toned, brown-colored van with tinted windows pulled up in front of the school. This is when Bianca told her teacher and some of her classmates that she actually wasn't going to be attending class today, and that instead she was going to go on a shopping trip with her uncle. She asked her classmates if they wanted to join her on the shopping trip, but they said no. Then Bianca walked over to the brown van, got inside, and they drove away. Now, this teacher didn't confirm that this was Bianca's uncle. He didn't confirm with the parents that she was supposed to skip class. He literally did nothing. All he did was mark Bianca as absent and went about his day. A couple of hours later, at 4:30 p.m., Bianca's family realizes that she never made it home from school. However, they weren't too freaked out because normally she would go hang out with her cousins after school or she would go to a friend's house, so they weren't too worried. However, when 8:30 p.m. hit and Bianca was still not home, that's when her mother Carmelita began to worry. She called all of Bianca's friends and cousins to see if anyone had seen her, but they said they had not seen her since 8:30 that morning. That's when Carmelita decided to call the Bridgeport Police Department and report her daughter as missing. When Carmelita heard from the school that Bianca had not shown up for class and that she had actually gone shopping with an uncle, she was completely shocked. She didn't understand why the school would just let her leave and not call her to notify her about this. On top of that, Bianca did not have an uncle. Carmelita says that she doesn't have any brothers and that no one in the family drives a brown van. So, who was this person? Well, Bianca's classmates were able to provide a pretty thorough description of this man. He literally didn't try to hide his identity. He wasn't wearing a mask. He wasn't wearing a hat with sunglasses. Like, he was out there in broad daylight and didn't care if people saw him. This man is described as a Hispanic male in his 20s or 30s, about 5'10" with an average build, has short curly black hair, long sideburns, and a beard. He was wearing a long-sleeve blue Gap pullover shirt, FUBU jeans with an image of Fat Albert on the right back pocket, and brown Timberland boots. A neighbor that lives across the street from the school says that he saw the brown van driving up and down the street earlier that morning before Bianca got to school. So this means that this was planned. Like, this man told Bianca, I'm going to be there at 8:30 in the morning to pick you up and we're going shopping. As the investigation continues, Bianca's friends tell police some pretty shocking information. They say that Bianca had a secret boyfriend. Okay, part 2 is up now. This is part 2 on what happened to 13-year-old Rachel Mellon Skemp. When police searched her room, 2 pillows on her bed and the blue blanket that she was wrapped in were missing. However, all of her winter clothes, her shoes, and her coats were still there, along with her purse and her Walkman. There was also no sign of chaos in her room. It didn't seem as if there was any type of struggle or forced entry. Vincent says that when he went on a walk, he did leave the front door unlocked, so that's probably how someone got in. Now, at first, police were not too eager to get on the case because they thought that Rachel had just ran away. This is because a year earlier, in 1995, Rachel had actually ran away from home. She had left a note explaining that she was running away because she feared she would be blamed for something that her siblings did. So she ran away to a friend's house and she was gone for almost 12 hours before she called her grandparents and asked them to pick her up. So because of this incident, police believed that she was running away again. They also thought that maybe she had run away to Dallas to go live with her father, Jeff, because she had told him that she wanted to live with him, but after they confirmed that she was not living with Jeff or with any relatives, then they began to think that she may have been abducted. As police were investigating, they noticed that Vincent had scratches on his arms. So they asked him about these scratches, and he said that he got them by working on his car. Now, police were already suspicious of Vincent, especially after they searched Rachel's bedroom and ended up finding her diary. In the diary, they found an entry from August of 1995 where Rachel says that Vincent kissed her and touched her inappropriately. He told her that he was doing this to teach her a lesson, to show her what a predator is, and to teach her how this shouldn't be done until she's older. Along with a journal entry, they also found a book called Daddy's Kiss. Now, some reports say that the book is innocent, it's just a book about a father and daughter relationship. Other reports say that this book talks about incest. So I'm not really sure about that, but along with the diary and the book, police also found a steak knife underneath Rachel's bed. So now he was abusing Rachel, he was the last person to see her, he had scratches on his arms, and on top of that, he had a history of domestic violence. In 1990, when Rachel was only 8 years old, Amy and Vincent got into a physical fight. He hit her, he pushed her down the stairs, and he verbally threatened her and Rachel. She ended up filing a restraining order against him and a police report, but eventually dropped all those charges and got back together with Vincent. So there's just a lot of information stacked up against Vincent. They also did a lie detector test on Amy and Vincent, and Amy passed hers, but Vincent failed his. They also took a DNA sample from him. They took a semen sample, saliva, and hair sample, but they haven't really revealed any information about that. To this day, in August of 2022, Rachel has still not been found, and no one has ever been charged in her disappearance. Vincent and Amy moved to Tennessee and are no longer cooperating with the Bolingbrook police. They also might have changed their phone numbers or have disconnected their phone because they're not answering anyone's calls. Rachel's real father, Jeff, moved from Dallas, Texas, all the way to Bolingbrook, Illinois to search for his daughter. If you know anything about Rachel's disappearance, please contact the number on the screen and let's bring her home. This is what happened to 13-year-old Rachel Mellon Skemp. Rachel was born on Tuesday, October 13th, 1982 in Melrose Park, Illinois. When she was 3 years old, her parents, Jeff and Amy, divorced, and Jeff moved to Dallas, Texas, while Amy stayed in Illinois with Rachel. After the divorce, Amy began dating a man named Vincent Mellon. They eventually got married and had 2 children together and moved into this house in Bolingbrook, Illinois. Now, Rachel is described as being a bubbly person with a great sense of humor. She always managed to stay positive, she was the life of the party, and always was the most beautiful girl in the room. She was an honor student, she was into recycling and nature, her favorite subject at school was science, and she eventually wanted to become a school teacher. On Tuesday, January 30th, 1996, 13-year-old Rachel was at school having a pretty normal day. However, as the day went on, her friends noticed that she was crying by her locker, which they thought was odd because she was always cheerful and very happy. So they approached Rachel, they asked her what was wrong, and she said that she had a problem, but that she would take care of it. She didn't really elaborate, she didn't tell them what problem she had, that's all she said. The following morning, on Wednesday, January 31st, Rachel decided to stay home from school because she had a sore throat and she felt sick. Mother Amy went to work early that morning and left Rachel in the hands of her stepfather Vincent, who was unemployed at the time, so he was able to stay home all day and watch Rachel. At 10:45 in the morning, Rachel called her paternal grandmother Lucy and thanked her for the Christmas presents she had sent. This was a quick 4 to 5 minute phone call, and Lucy says that nothing seemed out of the ordinary until Rachel got suddenly quiet. So she asked Rachel, "Is he there?" referring to Vincent, and Rachel said yes before telling her that she needed to hang up the phone. After her phone call with her grandmother, Vincent says that the two of them played Nintendo before Rachel decided to go upstairs and take a nap in her bed. This is when Vincent decided he was going to take the family dog for a walk. Now, it was freezing outside, it was 20 degrees below zero, so it wasn't ideal weather for someone to be outside and walking their dog. But that's what Vincent decided he wanted to do. He left the house at around 2:30 p.m., but didn't come back home until 30 minutes later at 3 p.m. He says the reason he took so long is because the dog actually broke free from its collar to go chase a rabbit. He tried to get the dog back on the leash, but he wasn't able to, so he left the dog and just figured that the dog would eventually make its way back home. At 3:15, his youngest daughter Ashley comes home and immediately goes to Rachel's bedroom to greet her. However, when she walks into her sister's room, she realizes that Rachel is gone. She goes to tell her dad Vincent, but apparently he doesn't do anything about it. Then an hour after that, the dog was eventually returned home with the help of a neighbor, and then 30 minutes later, Amy finally arrived home. When Amy arrived home, her youngest daughter Ashley told her that Rachel was missing. This is when Amy began to call all of Rachel's friends asking if anyone had seen her, but no one had. That's when she decided to call 911 and report her daughter as missing. Vincent says that the last time he saw Rachel, she was taking a nap in her bedroom and was wrapped in a blue blanket. She was wearing yellow sweatpants, a pink top, and red house slippers. Okay, part 2 is up now. This is what happened to 23-year-old Dane Elkins. Dane attended the University of Santa Cruz and studied engineering. Besides being great in school, he also excelled in sports. He's a 23-time world champion racquetball player and was featured in the Los Angeles Times for his achievements. Dane's family describe him as a kind, sweet, and caring person. His siblings say that he is genuinely a good guy and an amazing big brother. His younger brother Cody says that he looks up to Dane and that he has a big heart. On Monday, December 21st, 2020, Dane called his family as he was driving and told them he wasn't feeling well. He had been driving up and down the state of California, most likely distressed and paranoid due to the pandemic. The pandemic had really affected his mental health, and he believed that the government was watching him. So he called his family letting them know he wasn't feeling well, and unfortunately, that's the last communication they have ever received from Dane. Later that same day at around 8 p.m., Dane's car was found abandoned in a mountainous area between Los Angeles and Bakersfield, California. His car had a flat tire, and inside the vehicle was Dane's phone and his wallet. Since then, several people have reported seeing Dane in Northern California. One report is from a woman named Kelly who says she's confident she interacted with Dane outside of a Taco Bell in Oakdale, California in July of 2021. She says that he was a younger gentleman, probably in his early 20s, and that he was nice looking but a little scruffy. It seemed as if he had been traveling on the road for a while. So she bought him a meal at Taco Bell, and she says that he was very polite, well-spoken, and thanked her for the meal. Then she went on her way, and that was the last time she saw this man. A few weeks later, Kelly came across a TikTok urging people to be on the lookout for Dane Elkins, and that's when she connected the dots and realized it was him. Now, there have been a few other sightings of Dane in Oakdale, California. He was using his name at the time and told people he needed money for his journey to Oregon. He has also been seen in Modesto, California with a girl named Aubrey who has been helping him with his journey, but the family isn't really too sure who she is. So when the family heard that he was in Modesto, California, they went there to try and find him, but when they got there, he was already gone. Since then, the family has not heard from him or have had any other potential sightings. His mom, Deborah, created a TikTok page called Kindness Mom and has a Facebook group called Searching for Dane Elkins, where she posts updates about Dane's disappearance, potential sightings, and other information. His mom is just wow. She is truly amazing. She has been using social media to help bring awareness on her son's disappearance, and because of this, that's how the potential sightings of Dane have come up. Deborah is calling this search a kindness search for people suffering from mental illness. She says that her son, along with others, need compassion, empathy, and somebody to listen to them. The family says that they know that Dane hasn't done anything wrong and that he's free to be off the grid, but they just want to know that he's safe and that he's healthy. They want to offer him help, and after speaking with several mental health experts, they say that the sooner they find Dane, the better chance of recovery he has. Since there have been sightings of Dane, this gives the family hope that he is still out there. If you see Dane, please tell him that his family loves him and offer him some kindness by giving him food and water. Now let's bring Dane home. This is what happened to 16-year-old Monica Carrasco. She was born on December 13, 1986 and was from Balmorhea, Texas. In middle school, her nickname was Happy Happy because she always had a smile on her face and brought so much positivity to the room. Her older brother Juan says that she had a very bright future ahead of her. She had a dream. She wanted to do something big. She either wanted to go to Harvard and become a lawyer, or she wanted to work at NASA. Monica also loved her faith and was very religious. She was a Christian, a very active member of her church, and often loved to do Bible studies. In 2000, tragedy hit the Carrasco family when her father had a heart attack in front of them. When the paramedics arrived, they tried to do CPR on the dad, and it was very traumatizing for Monica and the rest of the family. Unfortunately, he didn't make it, and this really impacted Monica because she was very close to her father and she adored him. Monica was dealing with the loss of her father as best as she could, but unfortunately in 2003, she was hospitalized by her mother after losing 50 pounds quickly. She had also developed an eating disorder called anorexia. Her mother was trying to find a treatment center for Monica, but unfortunately no treatment center would take her since she was under 18 years old. Monica was pretty upset with her mother for having hospitalized her. Since their relationship was rocky, this is when Monica's aunt Velma offered to take her in. She said, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom, Monica can come stay here, and I can watch her and make sure that she eats. And everyone thought this was a good idea. Monica really loved her Aunt Velma and her Uncle Abel. She said that her aunt was basically a female version of her father. So the plan was set in motion, and Monica moved into this house with her aunt, her uncle, and her twin cousins. On Wednesday, October 1st, 2003, Monica called her older brother Juan at around 8 p.m. They were pretty much just catching up, but out of nowhere, Monica started to say some very odd things. She told her brother, "Why didn't you tell me that I was Jesus?" And her brother was like, "Who told you were Jesus?" And she told him that the little birdies told her. Juan thought this was very strange, so he kept asking her questions, and then she suddenly snapped out of it. Then she asked Juan if she could go live with him in Austin, Texas, but he said no, that she needed to wait until the doctors cleared her. And then they hung up the phone and Monica continued with her night. As the night continued, Aunt Velma and Uncle Abel were getting ready to go to bed, but they quickly checked in on the kids. They saw that the twins and Monica were playing video games, and then they went to bed. Then, at around 11 p.m., Monica stopped playing video games and headed to her room to sleep. However, the twins decided to stay up a little bit longer, but at around 1:30 a.m., they finally decided to go to bed, but they quickly stopped by Monica's bedroom to check in on her. They said they saw Monica in bed, sound asleep. Later that morning on October 2nd, Aunt Velma woke up and went to go wake up Monica. When she went inside Monica's bedroom, she realized that Monica was gone. However, she didn't immediately freak out. She thought that maybe Monica had gone on a morning run, or maybe she had gone to the garden outside to pray. However, she realized that Monica's running shoes were inside the room, and she also checked the garden and Monica wasn't there. This all occurred at around 7:30 in the morning, and it wasn't until 2 hours later at 9:30 a.m. when Aunt Velma told Monica's mother that her daughter was missing. Police arrived to the scene and they checked Monica's bedroom, but everything seems to be in order. Most of Monica's belongings were there, her shoes, her clothes, her socks, everything. The only things that were missing were Monica's nightgown and her Bible. Okay, part 2 is up now. This is part 2 on what happened to 16-year-old Monica Carrasco. The police realized that the only items missing are Monica's pajamas and her Bible. Now, there was a door inside Monica's bedroom that did lead to the outside, and when they checked the door was unlocked. So now police and Monica's aunt and uncle are thinking that maybe she wandered off on her own. However, since her shoes were still there, would she really go barefoot? The terrain around the aunt and uncle's house was pretty rugged, so if she did leave barefoot, it would be pretty painful. Police searched everywhere, but unfortunately there was no sign of Monica. Now, Monica's aunt and uncle believe that she may have become disoriented from the medication she was taking and decided to wander off on her own. They believe she left the house, walked all the way to Highway 17, which was only 4 blocks away, and then hitched a ride from a stranger. There really isn't any evidence to back this theory up, but that's what the aunt and uncle believe. Now, since we're on the topic of the aunt and uncle, I do just want to mention that they were both given polygraph tests, and the aunt passed hers, but the uncle failed his. Some people do think it's suspicious that he failed the polygraph test, but again, we don't really know why that happened. There's a lot of reasons why someone could fail. Monica's uncle passed away a few years ago, and her mom has come out in 2021 and said that she does not believe the uncle was involved with her daughter's disappearance. Police also investigated a school bus driver that had harassed Monica a few months before her disappearance. She had never officially reported the incident, but it did shake her up enough where she never wanted to ride on the bus again. So police found the bus driver, they questioned him, but they ultimately ruled him out as a suspect. And that's pretty much it, you guys. There aren't really any other leads or suspects in Monica's disappearance. Police do believe that maybe she left on her own, but they also suspect that foul play was involved and that Monica could be in danger. Some people believe maybe the uncle was involved, other people believe she may have ran away. I mean, we don't really know what happened, but her mother is still searching for her and still has hopes that she will find her. Even if she did wander away because of the medications, she still deserves to be found and her family still deserves to have closure. She was only 16 years old at the time of her disappearance and had a whole life ahead of her. Monica would be in her 30s now. There is a website called missingmonica.com where they post updates about the case, information about Monica, where you can submit a tip, and flyers you can download. If you have any information about what could have happened to Monica, please contact the Reeves County Sheriff's Office at this number here. I truly hope more people are aware of Monica's story, and hopefully someone out there knows something that can help the family. Here's a flyer by itself if you guys want to screenshot it and share it on your stories. My thoughts and prayers go out to the family, and I truly hope Monica is found soon. This is what happened to 25-year-old Julio Ramirez. He was born on August 16, 1996, and his family is from El Salvador. His family and friends say he was very hardworking, he was very smart, he was caring, and just an overall amazing person. He obtained 2 bachelor's degrees and 2 master's degrees from the University of Buffalo. And in 2021, he was living in Bushwick in Brooklyn, New York, where he was working as a social worker. On Wednesday, April 20th, 2022, Julio decided to go out to Hell's Kitchen, which is a very popular neighborhood in New York filled with bars and restaurants. At around 7 p.m., Julio meets up with his friend Carlos and they begin to bar hop. Their third stop of the night was at the Ritz Bar and Lounge. At around 2:26 in the morning, Julio takes his selfie in the bathroom at the Ritz Bar. Then, Julio and Carlos continue to have some drinks at the bar, but somewhere along the night, the two of them get separated. At 2:53 a.m., Julio sends Carlos a text message asking him where he's at, and Carlos says that he's inside the bar. Julio says he's actually outside the bar and asks Carlos to come out. Then we're not really sure what happens. Carlos doesn't reply until 3:45 a.m. and he tells Julio that he's home. He also tells Julio to come back to his apartment, but he never receives a response back. Later that morning at around noon, Carlos wakes up and this is a text message he sends to Julio. Now Julio had not replied to any of Carlos's messages, but he had read them. So Carlos starts to get concerned, and this is when he realizes that Julio stopped sharing his location with him at 3:46 that morning. None of this made sense to Carlos or any of Julio's friends. They all say that Julio always had his phone on him and he wouldn't just go MIA. If his phone died, he would go on his iPad to text his friends back, so since he hadn't done that, everyone was very concerned. After numerous failed attempts at getting in contact with Julio, his family and friends began calling the local hospitals to see if maybe he was in an accident. It wasn't until the next day, on Friday, April 22nd, that a hospital calls Julio's parents and tells them that Julio is dead. The hospital tells the parents that Julio was actually declared dead at 4:49 a.m. on Thursday, April 21st. The reason they couldn't call them earlier to let them know that Julio was dead was because he was found without his phone, his wallet, or his ID. Of course, Julio's family and friends were completely heartbroken. They just couldn't believe that this had actually happened, and they didn't understand how. The hospital told the family that Julio's death was a possible overdose, and they were all shocked. They knew that Julio did not do drugs. So the family starts speaking to the NYPD, and this is what they believe happened. So the night that Julio disappeared, there's surveillance footage that shows him standing outside the Ritz Bar alone. This is when he was waiting for Carlos to come outside, but he never did. Then surveillance footage shows him walking away, but this time he's no longer alone. Now he's walking away with 3 unidentified men. Then Julio and the 3 men get inside a taxi and they drive away. Okay, part 2 should be up in a few. Okay, this is part 2 on what happened to 25-year-old Julio Ramirez. So Julio and the 3 unidentified men leave the Ritz Bar and get inside a taxi. Then an hour later, the taxi driver approaches an NYPD officer and tells them that his passenger is unresponsive. The NYPD officer looks inside the cab and sees Julio sitting in the back seat alone. The officer and EMS tried to save his life, but unfortunately he was dead. And like I said, he was found without his phone and his wallet. So when Julio's family and friends hear this, they don't believe it's an accident. They just don't feel like it's an accident, that he took these drugs, got inside this cab with these 3 men that he didn't know, and then was found unresponsive without his phone and his wallet. To the family, this seemed targeted. Now, the family did find some evidence to support this theory. 3 days after Julio died, his brother was going through his computer just to see if he could find any evidence. This is when he checked Julio's bank account and realized that all of his brother's money had been drained. Julio had about $20,000 saved up and it was all gone, every last penny. Whoever had drained his account had made purchases through Apple Pay and Zelle, and they had also spent money on fancy dinners, designer clothes, they had gone to the spa, and they had bought kid Jordan shoes. After learning this, Julio's family now believes that he was targeted, drugged, and then robbed. Maybe their intention wasn't to kill Julio, but they definitely intended to rob him. So to this day, in July of 2022, police have still not been able to identify the three men. Julio's family and friends have not seen the surveillance footage, but they're hoping the police can release it to the public, so maybe they can help identify the men. The family also wants to know more about the cab driver. Did he hear Julio get robbed? Did he hear the three men threaten Julio? I mean, what happened inside that cab? The only information the police have released is that the cab driver says he dropped the three men off at different locations. So hopefully he remembers where he dropped them off so police can go there and find these men. Now, some law enforcement sources have come out and said that Julio's death may be tied to a robbery ring in New York. They said it appears to be a pattern that a group is going around robbing people in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood who have been drinking. They also said that one of the ring members usually poses as a cab driver. Now, normally the victim survives during these robberies, but this is the first time that someone has actually died. So maybe the robbery ring is connected to Julio, but either way, police need to continue to investigate until the family has some answers. The police still have not been able to track down who spent all of Julio's money, which the family is very frustrated about. We hope by making this video, we can keep Julio's story out there, spread awareness, and let the police know that we aren't going to forget about this. Julio's family and friends say that he would want people to learn from his story and to be more aware of their surroundings and know that not everyone has the best intentions. So please, if you're out and about in Hell's Kitchen or just anywhere, please be careful, please keep an eye out for your friends, and just stay safe. If you know anything about what happened to Julio or about these three men, please contact the NYPD Crime Stoppers. This is what happened to 26-year-old Maria Esperanza Diaz. She was born on July 6, 1995 and lived in El Tigre, Venezuela, and eventually moved to Neuquén, Argentina, where her mom and her older sister Livia lived. Maria is described as being just an absolutely beautiful person inside and out. She was a very hard worker, she had a very good job in accounting for a large company in Argentina, and she was always looking for better opportunities. This is when she began looking into moving into the United States in hopes of finding a better job and living the American dream. After her third attempt at obtaining a visa, she finally got approved and decided to move to the city of Charlotte in North Carolina. The reason she chose Charlotte is because she had a childhood friend named Victoria that was already living there and was going to offer her a place to stay and also help her get a job. So on Friday, April 22, 2022, Maria finally arrived to Charlotte in North Carolina at around 5 p.m. She FaceTimed her older sister Livia to let her know that she had arrived safely and also let her know that she was going straight to work, which her sister thought was strange because she had just landed in America, so most people would unpack, get settled in, but Maria was going straight to work. She was going to be working as a server at a bar/restaurant, and her friend Victoria was actually the one that helped her get this job. So that night, just a couple of hours after Maria had just landed in Charlotte, she went straight to work. Her friend Victoria drove her to the bar, introduced her to a couple of the co-workers, and then just left her there to work. The next day, on Saturday, April 23rd, Maria was going back to work, but after her shift ended, she was going to meet up with Victoria and two of Victoria's guy friends to have some drinks. Now, Maria did not know these guys. These were just Victoria's friends. Maria had never met them. So when her shift ends, Victoria picks her up, takes her back to the apartment, and the both of them start getting ready for their night out. Then, the two guy friends of Victoria pass by and pick the girls up. Their first stop of the night was actually back at Maria's job, which the family thinks is a little bit weird because why would they want to go drink at Maria's job, but maybe they got the drinks at a discount or for free. After spending some time at Maria's job, they then decide to go to this bar called Cos Bar to continue to drink. Everyone was having a good time, but after a while, Victoria started to feel sick. Now, there's some statements stating that Victoria had recently undergone an operation, and that's why she was feeling sick, but again, we don't know if that's 100% true. So she told Maria that she was going home, that she felt sick, and according to her, Maria said that she wanted to continue to stay at this bar and wanted to continue to drink. So Victoria didn't tell her, oh, you need to go home with me, or anything like that. She just said, okay, that's fine, I'm gonna leave and I'll call you an Uber later. At around 3 a.m., Victoria sends Maria a WhatsApp message asking her what time she's coming home, and according to her, Maria says to just wait up, that she'll be home in a bit. Victoria did try to wait up, but eventually fell asleep. Later that morning when she woke up, she realized that Maria had never made it home. She starts to send Maria WhatsApp messages, but doesn't get a response back. This is when she decides to FaceTime Maria, but instead of Maria answering the phone, a paramedic answers. It turns out that earlier that morning at 8:18 a.m., the Charlotte Police Department found an unconscious woman at this house on Glasgow Green Lane. They did everything they could to rescue the woman, but she was pronounced dead. This woman was also found lying next to a bag of drugs, and they believe her cause of death was an overdose. This woman was later identified as 26-year-old Maria Esperanza Diaz. When Maria's family heard about this, they were completely shocked. Maria had no history of doing drugs, she took very good care of her body, and this just wasn't like her. Even her cousins, her friends, her old classmates from school have come out and said that Maria did not do drugs. They don't believe that she would have done this out of her own free will. The family also doesn't understand how Maria arrived to this house. This house was abandoned, no one had been living in this house for a while, and it wasn't dirty, it just didn't have any furniture inside, and like I said, no one had been there for a while. However, neighbors have come forward stating that recently they saw people coming and going from this house, and they had also left the garage door open for some time. Now, how would Maria know that this house was abandoned and the perfect spot to go do drugs by herself if she had literally just arrived to the United States 2 days earlier? This house and the Cost Bar were 20 minutes away driving, so there's no way Maria walked there, and there's no way she got there on her own. She didn't own a car, she didn't order an Uber. I mean, how would she even know that this house existed? Like, someone had to have taken her there. The family has spoken to Victoria to get some more clarification, and she says that she only knew one of the guys that they were out with that night. She knew the driver of the car, but she didn't know the driver's friend. Police say they've interviewed all witnesses, so I'm assuming they spoke to the two guys, but I don't know that for sure. Police believe that there was no foul play involved and that Maria's death was an overdose. The family is still waiting for the toxicology report and for the autopsy to be done, which could take between 60 to 90 days. Now, they are hoping that they can fly Maria from Charlotte back to Venezuela so they can lay her to rest and be with the rest of her family. However, this could be pretty pricey. It could cost anywhere between $25,000 or even more or even less. So the family does want to open a GoFundMe to help raise these funds. So I will let you guys know once the GoFundMe account is open so that way we can help in any way we can. All the family wants is the truth. They want to know who Maria left the bar with, who took her to this house, who gave her the drugs, who left her there alone. Like, there's so many unanswered questions that the family has, and, Maria passed away in April, and they still don't have any answers. They just don't want the police to have tunnel vision and be like, oh yeah, it was an overdose, and not look further into it. The family 100% believes that foul play was involved and that someone gave Maria these drugs. It's hard for the family to stay on top of the investigation since they're all the way in Venezuela and in Argentina, so let's help the family out by keeping Maria's story alive. Maria was a young Latina woman that came to the United States in hopes of finding a better life, and this is what happened to her. My thoughts and prayers go out to Maria's family. Thank you guys so much for trusting in me to share your loved one's story, and I truly hope you all get the answers and justice you deserve. May Maria rest in peace. Let's talk about what happened to 15-year-old Sierra Lamar. Sierra was born on October 19, 1996, and was from Fremont, California. She's described as having a goofy sense of humor, playful personality, and just always wanted to make people laugh. She was a cheerleader in high school and had a very big social life. After her parents' divorce, she moved from Fremont to Morgan Hill, California. Sierra was upset about this. She really loved her life in Fremont, she loved her friends, but her mom wanted a fresh start. On March 16, 2012, Sierra got up at around 6 o'clock in the morning and started getting ready for school. She would normally leave her house at around 7:15 and would walk a few blocks to the bus stop to make it there before 7:30. There was a lot of empty land around her house, which made her bus stop unofficial. It was an unmarked spot that only Sierra would be picked up at. So at around 7 a.m., Sierra posted this quick selfie on her social media, said goodbye to her mother Marlene, and headed to the bus stop. Throughout the day, Sierra's mother sent her a couple of text messages reminding her to clean the bathtub and to take the school bus home. However, Marlene never got a response back, but she just assumed that Sierra was busy at school. Later that afternoon, Marlene got off work at around 3:45 p.m. and called Sierra just to check in once again. Sierra was still not responding to any of her text messages or her phone calls. Marlene started to get worried, so she headed home to see if Sierra had made it home from school. However, when she got home, Sierra was not there. She ended up going to Sierra's high school to search for her there, and that's when the teachers told her that Sierra never made it to class. It's crazy that the school didn't notify Marlene earlier that her daughter had never made it to school. Marlene says that if they had notified her, she would have left work early to search for her daughter. After this, Marlene called 911 and reported her daughter as missing. Police checked the footage from the school bus that morning just to see if Sierra did get on the bus, but she never did. That means somewhere between 7:15 when Sierra left her home and 7:30 when the bus arrived, something happened to Sierra. Now police are thinking that maybe someone has been watching Sierra and they know that she's the only person that ever goes to this bus stop. They start looking at the footage from previous days on the bus to see if anything stands out, but nothing does. The following day, on March 17th, search and rescue units find Sierra's cell phone just a few blocks east of where the bus stop is. Police check her cell phone to see if they can find any clues, but they found nothing. The next day, search and rescue begins searching around a shed just a few miles away from Sierra's home. While searching around the shed, they find Sierra's black Juicy Couture bag tucked between the shed and a cactus. Inside the bag, they find a couple of items. They found Sierra's jeans, her shoes, and the sweatshirt she was wearing in the selfie she posted earlier that day. They did find some dirt and debris on her clothing, which indicated to police that she might have been dragged. Police take in all the items found in the bag and begin testing it for DNA. They find DNA that belonged to then 21-year-old Antolin Garcia Torres. This DNA was already in the system due to a prior arrest for a 2009 felony assault charge. Now, Antolin only lived about 7 miles away from Sierra. He lived in this trailer that he shared with his mother, his wife, and their young daughter. Okay, part 2 is up now. This is part 2 on what happened to 15-year-old Sierra Lamar. Now that police have Antolin's DNA on Sierra's belongings, they begin to have a 24-hour surveillance on him just to see if he was holding Sierra captive and could lead them to her. Along with this, police were able to obtain security video that captured Antolin leaving the trailer park where he lived 15 minutes before Sierra would have left to the bus stop. And the next 6 hours after he leaves are completely unaccounted for. Police bring in Antolin for questioning and they ask him about those 6 hours, and he says he went on a solo fishing trip. Now, there's no witnesses or anything to verify this fishing trip. Then police ask him how his DNA landed on Sierra's belongings, and this is how he explains it. He says that he sometimes pleasures himself in the car and then grabs a tissue to help clean him up. Then he says he sometimes throws the tissue out the window, so maybe this tissue landed on Sierra's belongings and that's how his DNA was on them. I mean, really, your tissue with your DNA just happened to land on the belongings of a missing 15-year-old girl? Like what? Obviously, police aren't buying this, but they continue to ask him what he did for the rest of the day. Antolin says that after he went fishing, he went to the bank to cash in a check, and there is footage of him at this bank to confirm. Police look at the footage and they notice that the bottom of his jeans looks a little bit different. They believe that his jeans are either wet or they were covered in dirt. Witnesses say that the morning Sierra disappeared, they saw a red VW Jetta driving around near Sierra's home, which is the exact same car that Antolin drives. Police search his car and they find some of Sierra's hair wrapped around a rope in his trunk. They also found Sierra's DNA on the rear door handle and on the armrest. With this, police were able to confirm that at one point Sierra was in fact in Antolin's car, despite him claiming that he does not know her. So then, on May 21st, 2012, 2 months after Sierra was last seen, police finally arrested Antolin. He was charged with the kidnapping and murder of 15-year-old Sierra Lamar. He pleaded not guilty and his trial did not begin until January of 2017. The prosecution revealed that in 2009, Antolin attempted to kidnap 3 separate females in the parking lots of 2 Safeway stores in Morgan Hill. They believe that these attempted kidnappings were sort of a practice run for the abduction of Sierra. So then, on May 9, 2017, the jury found Antolin guilty. Since they have still not found Sierra's body, they gave him life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the trial, Antolin's own mother testified saying that her son was innocent and was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Sierra's family also spoke at the trial, and they say that they're happy with what the jurors did and that it does give them peace as a family to know that he won't be able to do this to another child. This guy is literally a father and has a daughter of his own and did this to someone else's daughter. To this day, Sierra's body has never been found. If you know anything about the whereabouts of Sierra, please contact the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office or their anonymous tip line. It's not right that after so many years, Sierra's family still does not know where she is and cannot lay her to rest properly. I truly hope that Sierra is found soon and gets the justice that she deserves. Let's talk about what happened to 8-year-old Sandra Cantu. Sandra was born on March 8, 2001. She lived in Tracy, California with her mother, her grandparents, and her 3 siblings. She lived at the Orchard Estates mobile home park, and everyone in this community was very friendly. Sandra had a lot of friends in this neighborhood, and one of her closest friends lived only a couple of houses down. She was a 5-year-old little girl, and her great-grandpa was a pastor at the local church, so Sandra's mom never really had to worry about who she was hanging out with. On Friday, March 27, 2009, Sandra came home from school and decided to go play at a friend's house for a bit before dinner. Some time went by and Sandra came back home. She checked in with her mom and told her she was going to go back out to keep playing. A couple of hours went by since Sandra was last seen, but Maria wasn't too worried. Like I said, she knew all of Sandra's friends, she trusted the community, and she knew Sandra would be back before dinner time. However, when dinner time rolled around at 7 p.m., Sandra had still not come home. This is when Maria decided to call the Tracy Police Department and report her daughter as missing. She was last seen wearing a pink Hello Kitty shirt, black leggings, and Hannah Montana flip-flops. Police start canvassing the area and they ask the neighbors if they've seen Sandra or noticed anything suspicious, and one of them did. One of the neighbors, named Melissa Huckabee, who was actually the mother of Sandra's 5-year-old friend, texted Maria earlier that day and told her, "Tell the police I had something stolen at around 4 p.m. I don't know if that makes a difference or not." Now a little girl was missing and someone's suitcase had been stolen from their driveway. So police hear all this information and they believe that Sandra was most likely abducted. Police discover that the Cantu family does have surveillance cameras outside of their house pointing to the front yard. They check the surveillance camera and they spot Sandra. You can see Sandra leaving her friend's house and running and skipping back home. Just as she is about to get home, something to the right of her catches her attention and distracts her. Instead of continuing straight home, Sandra goes in the opposite direction. So police begin to compile a list of suspects, and at the top of the list is Sandra's father, Daniel. Daniel and Maria were going through a pretty rough divorce, so they thought this might be motive for him to abduct his daughter. However, they checked his alibi, they cleared him, and he was no longer a suspect. Police then talked to an ice cream man that people had seen around the neighborhood talking to children, and they also cleared him as a suspect. Then they spoke to a man that 2 years before Sandra's disappearance had kissed her on the lips in front of her family. I mean, what? This man kissed a little girl on the lips and nothing happened to him? I don't understand, but police spoke to him. He admitted that he was attracted to younger girls and that he playfully kissed Sandra on the lips. Police spoke to him and they ruled him out as a suspect. It wasn't until a candlelight vigil was held for Sandra when police received new information. Part 2 is up now. This is part 2 on what happened to 8-year-old Sandra Cantu. So at Sandra's vigil, Melissa, the neighbor that I mentioned earlier, comes up to police all distraught and she's freaking out. She said she found this note that said, Cantu locked in stolen suitcase, thrown in water on Bachetti Road and Whitehall Road. Witness. That's all it said. So police see this letter and they think it's strange. They don't understand why there's so many spelling errors and why did Melissa get this note. It was just very strange, and the fact that Melissa had told police that her suitcase had been stolen, they just thought it was weird, so they brought her in for questioning. A little bit of background on Melissa. She's a single mother to a 5-year-old girl that's really good friends with Sandra. Her grandpa was a pastor at the local church, and she was actually a Sunday teacher there. Now, she says the day Sandra disappeared, she was at the church decorating her classroom. Then she said she made a phone call at 4 p.m. to report her stolen suitcase. Police check her phone records and they confirm that she did make this phone call, but just because she made the phone call doesn't mean she wasn't involved. They obtain a search warrant to search Melissa's car, and inside they find a post-it note. On the post-it note were written words that had been scribbled out. When they sent this note in for testing, they determined that the words were Bachetti Road, Whitehall Road, and water. All the same words that were written on the note that Melissa had found and turned into police. Underneath her dresser, they found a notepad that had the same type of paper that was used for the note. When police found all these items, they determined that Melissa was the one that wrote the note, sent it to herself, and used it to insert herself into the investigation. But why would she do this? Well, before police could answer this, they received a phone call on April 6, 2009. This phone call came from a man named Jose Luis Franco that was an employee at an irrigation pond. He says he was draining the pond when he noticed a black suitcase. When they opened up the suitcase, inside was 8-year-old Sandra Cantu. She was still wearing the same clothes she had on the day she disappeared. I won't go into too many details about how she passed away because it is very brutal, but I will say she was essayed, she was drugged, and her cause of death was asphyxiation. A witness came forward and they placed Melissa at the pond the day Sandra disappeared. After this, police went to her classroom to search and they found a white string that had been cut and retied. This same string had been used to tie the suitcase. Then they found a rolling pin that had blood on it, which they believe this rolling pin was used to essay Sandra. Police confronted Melissa and she basically broke down and said it was all an accident. She said that Sandra had been playing at her house with her daughter, they were playing hide and seek, and Sandra decided to hide in the suitcase. Somehow Melissa forgot that Sandra was in the suitcase, so she packed it up, put it in her car, and drove to the church. When she got to the church, she unloaded the suitcase because she thought her school supplies was there, but when she opened it, she saw Sandra inside. She tried to give Sandra CPR, she even put a wet towel on her head, but Sandra was gone. Now, police don't really believe this is what happened, especially because the DNA came back from the rolling pin and the blood on it was Sandra's. Melissa had also previously been searching on how to kill a child, so they think that this was premeditated. Melissa was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Let's talk about Rosie Tapia and this Barbie that was left on her grave. Rosie Tapia was a 6-year-old little girl from Salt Lake City, Utah. Her parents are Luwin and Roberto Tapia, and she has 2 older sisters named Emilia and Esmeralda, as well as 4-year-old twin siblings. Rosie is described as being a very playful, happy, and loving kid. On Saturday, August 12, 1995, 18-year-old Emilia was left in charge to babysit Rosie and the 2 twins while her parents went out for a date. At around dinner time, Rosie went outside to play in the playground that was right in front of the apartment. She went to play outside while Amelia stayed inside with the twins. Some time went by and Amelia hears a knock at the door. She opens the door and sees a man standing there carrying Rosie. This man says that he saw Rosie get kicked by another kid and she fell off the slide. So he decided to pick her up and carry her home. Amelia thought this was pretty strange. She didn't know this man and it was just weird that he carried her home, so he took Rosie and put her inside. He closed the front door and as the man was walking away, he said, "Bye, Rosie." Now once they're inside, Amelia asked Rosie where she got hurt and how this man knew her name. Rosie says that she never got hurt on the slide and that she didn't know who this man was. So Amelia thought the incident was weird, but since Rosie wasn't hurt, they continued on with their night. They played some games together, watched a movie, and at around 8 p.m., Rosie and the twins went to bed. Luine and Roberto get home at around 2 a.m. on Sunday, August 13th, and before Luine goes to bed, she goes into the kids' bedroom and checks on them. The family lived in a basement-level apartment, and Rosie and the twins shared a room. So Luine walks in, she sees that the kids are sleeping, and she decides to go to bed. At around 5 a.m., Luine wakes up with a very uneasy feeling. She begins to make her way to the kids' bedroom, and she realizes that the bedroom door was closed. Which she thought was weird because when she checked on the kids earlier, she had left the bedroom door open. She makes her way into the bedroom. She sees that the twins are asleep in bed, but when she looks over at Rosie's bed, Rosie is not there. She sees that the window is wide open, the curtain is on the floor, and the window screen had been removed. She wakes up the rest of the family. They start looking for Rosie, but they can't find her. This is when Luine decides to call the police and report Rosie as missing. When detectives arrive, they realize that the screen had been pulled out from the outside of the apartment and the window frame was bent, which made them believe that whoever did this used a tool. The curtain was partially lying on the floor with the shoe print on it. There was a dresser underneath the window, and on the dresser was a towel that had that same shoe print. So police believe that Rosie was kidnapped between 2:30 a.m. and 5 a.m. Amelia tells the police about the man that carried Rosie home earlier that night. Immediately, the police think that this was just a ruse for this man to figure out where Rosie lived. Amelia described the man as a white male with a thin build and was wearing a baseball cap and dark sunglasses. Another point that the family made is that Rosie had only been sleeping in this bedroom for a month. No one besides the family knew that Rosie had switched bedrooms, so the man that brought her home from the park could have been stalking her and somehow tricked her to reveal where she slept. While police are searching Rosie's home, they get a call at 10 a.m. saying that a body has been found in the canal. Okay, part 2 is up now. This is part 2 on what happened to 6-year-old Rosie Tapia. At 10 a.m., police get a call saying that a body has been found in the canal right behind Rosie's apartment. When they retrieved the body, it was identified as 6-year-old Rosie Tapia. She was still wearing her pajamas. An autopsy was conducted on Rosie, and just a quick trigger warning, it is disturbing. Rosie was beaten, R-worded, and drowned to death. A witness that lived in the same apartment complex came forward and said that earlier that morning he saw a teenager coming from the direction of the canal. At first he thought the teenager was wearing pants with 2 different colors, but then realized that the pants were wet. With this information, police were determined that Rosie's killer lived nearby and knew the layout of the home. They knew that there would be 3 children inside that bedroom and that one of them would be Rosie. After Rosie's body was found, there was a funeral and then she was buried. A lot of people would come visit the grave and leave her gifts, balloons, flowers, and Luine thought this was very sweet, so she kept all the items. Police searched and searched for any clues that could point them to Rosie's killer, but they had nothing. It wasn't until years later in 2015 that Rosie's little brother came forward with new information. He says the night Rosie was kidnapped, he saw a man standing inside the room with a beard. The man told him to go back to sleep, and he did. Now, some people don't really know if they can trust what he says because he was only 4 years old at the time, so it could be a part of his imagination. After this, a couple more years went by without any movement in the case. It wasn't until 2017 when the Utah Cold Case Coalition, founded by Jason Jensen, joined the search for Rosie. Once he got on the case, he realized that the witness back in 1995 that told police he saw a teenager walking from the canal was never properly interviewed or sat down with a sketch artist. So he contacted the witness, and this is a sketch they made of the teenager. He's described as a 16 to 17-year-old Hispanic boy with a slight build and a narrow face with high cheekbones. He was wearing denim jeans, a white shirt, and a medium-length gold chain. Now, Jason also learned that Rosie's older sister Amelia used to have friends visit her at night through that window. So he believes that this person of interest may be a friend of Amelia's, someone that knew they could sneak into that house through that specific window. In fact, one of Amelia's friends came forward and said that they knew who this person was. He says this looks just like his friend that used to go with him to sneak in and visit Amelia at night through that window. Now, police have spoken to this friend, but they haven't released much details about him, so I don't really have an update on that. After this, years would go by without any movement in the case. It wasn't until Jason became aware of the items left on Rosie's grave a few days after she was murdered. One of those items was a Barbie Pretty Hearts doll, and the Utah Cold Case Coalition believes that there is a specific reason why this Barbie was left there. Maybe the killer went to visit Rosie's gravesite and left this Barbie for her. They were able to extract testable amounts of DNA from the Barbie and are willing to pay for a private lab to test the DNA and see if a match appears. However, they're hoping that someone in the public comes forward and admits that they were the one that left the Barbie there. It's now been over 26 years since Rosie was murdered and her case remains unsolved. Unfortunately, her sister passed away without ever finding out the truth.
Police department. Hello. I'm Anthony Calabito. Okay, whereabouts in Albuquerque? Hello.
Let's talk about what happened to 9-year-old Antoinette Calladito. Antoinette was born on December 25, 1976 in New Mexico. She lived in Gallup, New Mexico with her mother, Penny Calladito, who was a member of the Navajo Nation, and her two sisters, Wendy and Sadie. Antoinette is described as being very mature for her age. She was only 9 years old, but everyone says she acted like a 15-year-old. Her younger sister, Wendy, says that Antoinette acted like a second mother. She always made sure that their clothes were ironed for the week, that the children were fed, and that the house was clean. She was even making tortillas at the age of 6, so everyone says she was just very mature and always wanted to make sure her siblings were taken care of. On the evening of April 5th, 1986, Penny hired a babysitter to watch the 3 girls while she went out with some friends to a bar. Penny arrived home at around midnight and she realized that Antoinette and the 2 girls were still awake, so she told them they could stay up for a little bit longer and she sent the babysitter home. The girls and Penny stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning talking, and then they all went to bed. Now, their house did have 4 bedrooms, so every single girl did have their own room, but Penny says that on most nights, all of the girls slept in her bedroom in the same bed. So that night was like any other, all the girls went to sleep in the same bed. Everyone was sound asleep when all of a sudden there was a knock at the door. This woke up 9-year-old Antoinette and her 7-year-old sister Sadie. They both approached the front door and they heard a male and a female saying that they were their aunt and uncle. They told the girls, "Hurry, we're cold out here, open the door." But since neither Antoinette nor Sadie recognized this man or woman, they decided to not respond, not open the door, and they went back to sleep. A few moments later, there was a second knock at the door, but this time only Antoinette woke up. Her sister Sadie says that she saw Antoinette get up in her pink nightgown, close the door behind her, and then she fell back asleep. The next morning, Penny woke up at around 7 a.m. and started to get the girls ready for Bible school. She woke up Wendy and Sadie, but quickly realized that Antoinette was not in bed. So Penny and the girls started to look around the house, but Antoinette was not there. She then checked the front door and realized that both the screen door and the front door were unlocked, which she thought was weird because the night before she had locked both of them. But she just assumed that maybe Antoinette had woken up early that morning and gone outside to play with the neighbors. So Penny and the 2 girls go around the neighborhood asking the neighbors if they have seen Antoinette, but no one has. This is when Penny started to panic, and at around 11 o'clock that morning she called the police and reported Antoinette as missing. However, the police weren't too eager to get on the case. They told Penny that she needed to wait 8 hours before reporting Antoinette as missing. It wasn't until Monday, April 7th, that the police finally arrived to the Calladito home and helped look for Antoinette. According to a neighbor, they saw a brown van with New Mexico license plates parked outside the house between 6:30 and 7 o'clock. Okay, part 2 should be up now. This is part 2 on what happened to 9-year-old Antoinette Calladito. So the neighbor says they saw a man leave the brown van and approach the front door. However, they didn't get the license plate or a good description of the man because to them this didn't really seem that weird. A couple of the neighbors said that they saw people coming and going from Penny's house all the time. When police asked Penny and Antoinette's father about this, they both said that Antoinette would have not opened the door to a stranger. They both said that in order for Antoinette to have opened the door, she would have had to open the screen door and then the front door, and she would have only done that if she trusted the person on the other side. After hearing this information, police started to believe that Antoinette may have been abducted. Police and the family searched and searched, but there was just absolutely no sign of Antoinette. It wasn't until a year later in 1987 when the Gallup Police Department received a very disturbing phone call. This is the phone call I played at the start of part 1, but I'll play it again here.
Police department. Hello. I'm Anthony Calabito. Okay, whereabouts in Albuquerque? Hello.
Since the phone call only lasted less than 30 seconds, police weren't able to trace it, and to this day, they don't really know if this was actually Antoinette. However, I honestly do feel like that was her. It sounded so real, and when Penny heard the tape, she also thought it was her daughter. After this phone call, 4 years would go by without any other movement in the case. It wasn't until a waitress in Carson City, Nevada contacted police and told them she had seen Antoinette. She had served a table with a male, a female, and a young girl between the ages of 14 and 15 that resembled Antoinette. She says that the man and the woman seemed very unkempt and that their appearance was dirty and that the girl seemed very nervous. She says the girl kept dropping her utensils on the floor, and anytime she would pick it up and give it to her, the girl would tightly squeeze her hand back. When the three of them left the restaurant, the waitress found this note underneath the young girl's plate. At this point, police had released age-progressed photos of Antoinette, so the waitress made the connection, and that's when she called the police. However, since there wasn't any CCTV footage or anything else to really prove that this was Antoinette, the sighting has never been confirmed. After this potential sighting, police decide to speak to Wendy and Sadie again to see if they remember anything from that night. This is when the youngest sister, Wendy, who was 5 at the time, brings forward some new information. She told police that the night Antoinette disappeared, she also heard the second knock. She saw Antoinette leave the bedroom to go check the front door, and she quietly followed behind. When Antoinette approached the front door, she asked, "Who is it?" Then she heard a male voice respond saying, "It's Uncle Joe." She opens a door and Wendy sees 2 men come inside, grab Antoinette, and drag her to this brown van parked outside. Antoinette was kicking and screaming and saying, let go, but unfortunately she was put inside the van. Wendy says she didn't reveal this information sooner because she was scared her mom would get mad at her. The family did have an Uncle Joe, but police and the FBI have talked to him and they've cleared him as a suspect. However, police do believe that the 2 men are members of the family or friends of the family. Police believe Penny may know more than she's letting on, but unfortunately in 1989 she passed away. I hope Antoinette is found.